Okay, so I got my knife, take out the wax paper, get the ferro rod. Just scuff it up a little bit. And have at her. Here we go, we got her going. Right, I got flame. Now I can coax this along into whatever I want. Hey, it's Greg here with Outdoors on the Cheap, and I thought I'd do a quick video on fire starting, specifically using wax paper with a ferro rod to get a flame. Now, I've done videos on fire kits before, saying that my basic fire kit always when I go in the woods is to bring a Bic lighter, a pack of matches in a waterproof container, and a ferro rod. The go-to is the Bic lighter because it's easy and it makes a flame. Plan B is the matches because they make a flame. Plan C is the ferro rod, right? So a Bic lighter is great, but it's mechanical, it can fail. Matches are great, but if they get wet, they will fail. The ferro rod is extremely reliable, but it's tedious to get a fire going because you don't start with a flame. You run the back of your knife along the ferro rod or some other sharp thing, and it creates this glowing, hot piece of, fragment of metal that comes off of the ferro rod, and that will put a flame to some material that'll take the flame. Now, there's lots of things you can find in nature. I keep doing this with my hands because it's around -12 Celsius today, so I gotta use them in a minute to show you what I'm talking about. I don't want them to freeze up on me. There's lots of things you can find in nature to take a spark from a ferro rod to get a flame going. You can scuff up birch bark. That's probably one of the best things if you have birch bark available. Usnia, old man's beard, that works. Sometimes it can be a bit damp, and when that's the case, you find the blisters of balsam fir or white spruce. You just look for evergreens and look for blisters on the evergreens. This one right next to me doesn't have any of those, but some evergreens have blisters. You don't really need to know a lot about trees. You're just looking for something that looks like a blister on an evergreen. You pop that with your knife, you get some of that sap. That sap's flammable. For that matter, you can use that sap to get some other thing like this somewhat dry, dead wood burning, right? Anything that's marginal. And also, if you can find dry wood, if you can get into something, dead branch of a tree or something like that, make fine shavings, that sort of thing, or a really fine feather stick. If the wood's dry enough, you can get that burning with a ferro rod. All that stuff's tedious. All that stuff is a pain if you're in a hurry or your hands are really cold or they're failing, like the situation I'm in right now. You can see my hands are raw and cold and they're not working well. And my thumbs are actually completely numb. I could cut these and I wouldn't even know. So I want to fire quickly. In a situation like that, as I always do, I always have a piece of wax paper attached to my knife because wax paper will take a spark from a ferro rod, which I also always have attached to my knife. So let me show you all you need to do to get that to work. Okay, so I got my knife, take out the wax paper, and get the ferro rod. Okay, scuff the ferro rod up a little bit so I know it's gonna work for me. Get it going. It's always good to do that before you start. Now I just take my wax paper. I don't need all of this, right? I can use a portion of it, save a portion for later. You can also, if you're trying to light a big fire or something like that, use this like a match, right? You can take a piece of this, bend it, right? Once you get a flame going, light it. Use that like a match to light something else. Okay? Now, all you got to do is just scuff it up a little bit. The back of your knife. Okay? And you pin it down, the ferro rod. And have at her. There we go, we got her going. All right, I can put that old man's beard in there. I can get this stuff going. Right, I got flame. And now I can coax this along into whatever I want. You can see that, that's a really useful thing to have in your kit for lighting a fire. I mean, some people say bring a candle, blah, 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 blah. All these things you can bring are handy. But for me, the most useful things are the things that are in your pockets. They're hanging off of you, they're on your person, right? They're not in some separate bag or whatever. Those are the things you're always going to have. Those are the things you're always going to have handy. So having a useful tinder, you know, if you're going to bring along a ferro rod as a main source of fire, or like a backup, or for me it's like this, you know, the third system, right? If you're going to bring that along, it makes sense to have a way to turn that ferro rod into a flame. The ferro rod does not make a flame, right? It makes a thing that makes a flame if you've got the right material to throw that spark into, right? So it doesn't make sense to me to just bring a ferro rod in the absence of some material that'll take a spark relatively easily with very little work. Oh my God, my hands feel so much better. I'm gonna get the hot dog fingers here in a minute because my fingers got so numb. Anyway, for me, the best setup is to have not only the ferro rod, but something you can use with the ferro rod to make a flame. As I mentioned, there's all kinds of materials in nature that you can use, but sometimes they're not available, or you're just not in the mood to mess around with that stuff. You want to get your fire going, right? This fire would have been easier to start with a Bic lighter. I wouldn't have needed the wax paper with a Bic lighter because I would have started with flame. I had fine enough material to get a fire going with starting with a flame. And I would not have needed the wax paper with the match, really. Unless I was trying to start a fire with really wet wood, that sort of thing, then it can be handy. But with the ferro rod, none of the materials I had here, except maybe the old man's beard, none of them would really take a flame. I suppose the finer wood, if I prepared it with the knife, made fine shavings and messed around, I probably could have got that, you know, in a pinch, got that working as well. But the wax paper, right? That's why you bring that along. And I still have more left over if I don't want to make another fire. You should bring enough wax paper that you can make, 3, 4, 5 fires, right? What kind of situation you're going to be in, right? You make your fire, then everything's okay. Then you got time to gather other materials that are really good for taking sparks and get them nice and dry. The old man's beard, birch bark, other stuff like that. Anyway, just a short video on making fire with a ferro rod and the value of having some wax paper attached to, your ferro rod right next to it, right with it. So you've got a tinder, you've got something that'll take a spark, make a flame, makes your whole life easier, makes it easier to get that fire going. You're in a tough situation, you don't want to mess around, you haven't got a lot of time, and the ferro rod's all you got for whatever reason. You don't want to be messing around sometimes. So, and you don't want to have to bring along a kit or pill bottles or some bag or some other thing. You want it on your person, you want it in your pocket, or in my case, attached right to the knife. All right, so I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and until next time, enjoy the outdoors on the cheap. Thanks for watching.